safe to express an opinion in Germany after the authorities in Berlin had spoken. But Dr. Hugo Eckener wasn't silenced. He was the world's leading authority on airships, and privately at least, he continued to express his view that Captain Pruss was to blame. Modern airships are only a fraction of the Hindenburg size. They're not designed or built the same, and they aren't inflated with hydrogen. But the fundamentals of flying them haven't changed. Airship pilots Eddie Wynne and Scott Daneker have been asked to review the landing maneuver ordered by Captain Pruss.
At some point they've incurred this before, or you know, turns like this.
Yeah.
If they were going to have a problem there, they'd have noticed it before now. But.
Yeah. Here's the beginning of the sharp turn that they were talking about. He had winds coming out of this direction, and maybe he should have made more of a direct shot into the mast. But you know, this was the guy's. This was Captain Pruss, who was the commander at the time. This was his first trip in command on a transatlantic flight. Maybe he rushed it a little bit too much.
Did pilot error contribute to this disaster? Did the ship's structure fail? Or was this a crime after all? And so long after the event, is the evidence that has survived good enough to get closer to the truth?
One of the things we often have to do in the accident investigation process is work with what we've got. It's all very well to say, it would be nice if we had such and such, but the fact is, this is what we've got in this case, this is what we have to work with, and we have to make the best use of what we've got.
What we do have is a 42-minute recording that was made at the end of the Hindenburg's last flight. Can it give acoustics experts any new clues? The Hindenburg maintained radio contact until 30 minutes before the crash. There's no record of exactly what happened in the control car, as black boxes didn't exist then. At the time of the crash, witnesses heard and felt different things. Some of the crew stationed in the stern did not feel a shock, but passengers in the middle of the ship and crew who were near the bow were knocked off their feet. The blast wave traveled to this metal building where a radio announcer and his engineer were recording the ship's arrival.
400 or 500 feet into the sky, it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around.
The 4 discs that contain this recording are stored at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, in America. This was one of the first recordings of a live news event. Copies were made for broadcast the next day, but these are the original discs.
Since the late 1920s, to record any programs from radio as air checks or as reference recordings, the broadcast industry came up with what they call an instantaneous transcription disc recording method. This was tape recording in the 1920s and 1930s. This is the kind of recording, one of, I would say one of 4 or 5 in the National Archives that has the greatest intrinsic value just in the object itself.
Minutes before the Hindenburg arrived, the reporter Herb Morrison went out onto the field with his microphone. What happened next shocked him.
Get it, Charlie, get it, Charlie.
Then the blast wave traveled to the metal building where the disc cutter was.
The deep groove injuries you see in the cuts in the grooves occur right about 1.5 inches before the end of the first disc. The recording lathe head bounced up from the force of the explosion. Rather miraculously, the engineer was able to control the recording head and carefully lift it back down into the grooves.
Can a recording made in the 1930s reveal new clues using modern technology? To find out, a copy has been digitally analyzed at Southampton University by acoustic specialist Stuart Dine.
Wait. Get it started, get it started. It's fire.
Now, buried within that segment of the recording, there are two events. One is the arrival of the ground shock, which travels quite quickly, and then subsequently the arrival of the air shock.
The separation of these two events indicates how far away the microphone was from the explosion. But that distance is already known. It was 2,180 feet.
Now, this can tell us what the speed of propagation of the blast wave through the air was, and hence we can work backwards to determine what the yield of the explosion must have been. Now, that is potentially a very useful piece of information for the accident investigation, because it may indicate what actually blew in the first place.
Now technology can write the signature or sound picture of such events. Will it reveal whether the explosion that destroyed the Hindenburg was caused by a bomb?
An incendiary device will, one would expect, produce a very much smaller blast wave than a whole hydrogen cell. But the blast wave from the hydrogen cell would be so much larger and would travel so much more quickly than the explosion from the incendiary device that the one would catch up with the other.
Even though it isn't possible to determine whether a bomb caused this explosion, acoustics still has a role to play. And an analysis of witness statements has challenged the accepted theory of exactly where the explosion occurred. People on board the Hindenburg heard a muffled sound, but before then, some ground crew heard a loud crack. They were standing on the starboard side near the middle of the ship, not at the stern where the fire was first seen.
Is there any significance attached to the fact that some people heard a crack and other people heard a more muffled sound? They're quite likely to have heard the same thing.
But the people who heard a crack would have had an unimpeded path between them and the source of the explosion. Dr. Eckener believed the sharp turn during the landing maneuver caused a cable to break. Could that have been the crack some people heard? And if that happened, how could it have caused this disaster?
One consequence of the cable breaking and then whipping as a result of releasing its elastic energy would be that it provided enough mechanical force to perhaps cut a hydrogen cell.
Would a leaking gas cell be enough to bring the Hindenburg down? Not by itself, but if a cable broke, it could have struck another metal object and caused a spark. At 804 feet long, the Hindenburg remains the largest aircraft ever built. It was 3.5 times the length of a jumbo jet, but it weighed only half as much. For the first time, passenger accommodation was contained entirely inside the hull. The Hindenburg was as spacious and luxurious as an ocean liner, but it gave a faster and a smoother ride.
I flew on the Hindenburg once, and it was over Lake Constance. It was just a short flight of an hour and a half, but it was fantastic. It's just floating through the air. There were no air pockets, and obviously it was not over the mountains, so there was no quick descent or ascent. And it was floating, and you hardly heard the engines, and it's like, and you did not notice any rocking like on a ship. It was a unique experience. Of course, I was only 6 years old when this happened, but I never forget that.
The Hindenburg flew almost 3,000 hours during its first year. Quick turnarounds were necessary to establish a profitable transatlantic service. Routine maintenance and repairs were done during flights. But full inspection of the hull and equipment trials were left to major overhauls. This policy was to have potentially dangerous results. The Hindenburg lost an engine coming back from South America. The ship almost drifted over Africa, where it could have crashed. Dr. Eckener was furious. Afterwards, he ordered all section chiefs, like Dr. Schirmer's father, to travel on the ship.
Had to be on board on so many flights to make measurements on these ships while in flight, so no such accident or mishap could happen.
Commander Rosendahl told the inquiry that there was nothing in the record to indicate